The morning sky in North Fort Myers was a dull shade of gray, the kind of sky that smothered sunlight and hinted at something unspoken. At precisely 7:47 a.m. on a February day in 2024, silence was replaced with the thrum of engines and the crunch of tires rolling onto cracked pavement. For sheriff's cruisers and two unmarked SUVs boxed in a faded two-story home on a quiet cul-de-sac, there was no warning, no siren. Just the soft clatter of boots on concrete and the rattle of an unlocked gate being pushed open. Inside the house, Samantha Lee White stirred from sleep. Her son whimpered in the next room, a baby monitor crackling faintly beside her bed. She blinked groggily, a hangover pinching behind her eyes, unaware that the world she knew had already ended. A sharp knock split the air. Then another, louder this time. Sheriff's office. Search warrant. She grabbed a hoodie off the floor, staggered to the door, and opened it, barefoot, breathless, her toddler now clutching her leg. 6 officers stood before her in tactical vests, hands resting on belts heavy with gear. One of them, a detective with a weathered face and steady eyes, stepped forward and held up a document. "We're here under the authority of a court-issued search warrant. We need to enter the premises and secure electronic devices." Samantha blinked, confused. "What is this? What's happening?" "I'll explain everything once we're inside. Please, ma'am, just step back." Her voice broke as she tried to process. "I have a child, can I just—" One officer nodded. "You can hold him. We'll walk with you." And just like that, her living room became a crime scene. Officers swept through hallways, opened drawers, unplugged modems, lifted couch cushions. Upstairs, they found a cheap Android phone hidden in the back of the toilet tank, wrapped in a plastic bag, its screen still illuminated from a recent use. In the kitchen, Samantha's knees buckled. She collapsed into a chair, holding her son so tightly he began to cry. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "This must be some mistake." The lead detective sat across from her, carefully setting the warrant on the table. "This isn't a mistake, Samantha. We're here based on information gathered in a separate investigation. Something we found led us to this address. We have reason to believe you're in possession of illegal images of a minor. But during our prep, something else surfaced. Something worse." She looked at him, confused. "Worse." The detective hesitated. "We recovered digital files, and we've been informed that there may be evidence related to animal sexual abuse." Her eyes glazed over. She looked toward the window, the blinds gently swaying in the breeze. It started months earlier. She had been alone one evening while her husband, John, was out, bored, a glass of wine in hand. She stumbled across an online forum. What began as idle curiosity turned to something darker, videos of horses, dogs, women. The longer she stared, the more detached she became from the horror of what she was consuming. When John found out, he didn't react how she thought he would. Instead of rage, he was quiet, almost curious himself. A week later, he brought home a tripod. Samantha sat at the table now, unmoving, while officers moved around her. She had stopped crying. Her son had been carried upstairs by a female officer, gently placed back into his crib. "I never hurt him," she said. "My son. I never touched him. You have to believe me. We'll determine that." The detective replied, emotionless. An hour passed. Her husband arrived in the driveway, parking crookedly behind the patrol cars. When officers opened the door, he walked in slowly, eyes darting. "What's this?" John asked, pretending to be clueless. "What's going on?" They told him. The phone, the videos, his wife's statement. And then they asked him a single question. "Why was your phone hidden in a toilet tank?" He didn't answer at first. Then he looked at Samantha. Their eyes locked. "Wasn't me who hid it," he said. "But yeah, I filmed it. We were drunk. It was her idea." She let out a strangled cry. "You bastard." Officers stepped between them. "So you admit there's video content?" The detective asked. John nodded, shrugging. "It was one time. Maybe twice." She said she was into it. Later, the warrant yielded dozens of images, Some of bestiality, others of Samantha posing nude beside the family dog. There were videos too. The most damning clip, just 92 seconds long, showed Samantha in the act. Her child's toys were visible in the background. The community erupted. Within 24 hours, the story broke across Florida news. The headlines screamed across social media. Neighbors were stunned. One woman cried during her interview with local reporters. "I knew her. We shared wine. I babysat her son once." The Department of Children and Families removed the child from the home. No evidence of direct abuse toward the boy was found, but the environment was ruled unsafe. Samantha sat in a Lee County jail cell, her wrists bruised from the cuffs. Her head hung low. When questioned further, she said, "I don't know why I did it. I watched something I shouldn't have, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a spiral, but I never thought I'd actually do it." John, meanwhile, hired a lawyer. He told his attorney that Samantha pressured him, that he was just a camera guy. But detectives discovered messages, chats between the couple, making plans, sharing links, egging each other on. Dr. Daniel Bober, a forensic psychiatrist, was brought in to review the case. He met Samantha once, then filed a lengthy report. Samantha White exhibits signs of unresolved trauma, likely dating back to adolescence. There are indications of paraphilic fixation, specifically zoophilia. Her moral boundaries are disintegrated, but she does not show signs of psychosis. She is not legally insane. She knew what she was doing. In court, Samantha pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts of sexual activity with animals. The charges of possessing and transmitting child pornography were dropped in a plea deal. Before sentencing, she was allowed to speak. "I have failed as a mother. I have failed myself. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope my son never learns what I did. And if he does, I hope he forgets." The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She would also be placed on Florida's Animal Abuser Registry, a scarlet letter that would follow her for life. As for John, his case was still pending. He remained in custody, his charges including recording the acts, tamper with evidence, and later, possession of child pornography unrelated to the dog videos. The deeper they dug into his digital archives, the darker things became. Detectives uncovered folders labeled with code names. One folder, Lullabies, contained images so disturbing they had to be handed over to the FBI. A new investigation began. This time, it wasn't just about animals. And somewhere in a secure facility outside Fort Myers, Samantha received a letter. No return address. No name. Just one sentence, written in neat block letters. "You should have kept your mouth shut." He wasn't finished yet. She sat back on her prison cot, eyes wide, heart pounding. And for the first time since her arrest, she was truly afraid. Samantha stared at the stark white envelope trembling in her hands. Every line of ink burned into her brain. "You should have kept your mouth shut." He wasn't finished yet. The words echoed through her, reverberating in the cold confines of the prison cell. Someone knew more. Someone was watching. And she feared she was only scratching the surface of what John really was. She pressed her palm against the cool metal bunk. Sleep was impossible. The fabricated calm of prison walls did nothing to quell the rising dread. The night felt endless as distant voices and metallic clinks drifted through the hall. John had claimed he was just a cameraman, but this letter told her otherwise. Someone, or he, was not done. In the hushed corridors of Lee County's evidence room, Detective Ruiz traced his finger along row after row of digital file boxes. The folder codenamed Lullabies had left a deep scratch on his conscience. Inside were images and videos that transcended bestiality, content implicating minors. He'd felt the weight of those files all night, imagining a hidden world layered beneath the one he'd already exposed. His face creased in concern. He couldn't risk a leak. If those files had made their way onto the dark web, if traffickers had downloaded them, justice would be impossible. He tapped the last archive entry labeled Lullabies Unfiltered. Permission from the state attorney's office would be needed, a heavy lift. But the folder's contents were undeniable. Scenes indicating child victims, clothed in toys, crying softly. the heart of every detective. Outraged, broken, determined. Back in the prison, Samantha's brightest light had gone out. She needed answers. Who sent the letter? She began asking around, feigning fear. Inmates shared stories. Letters with no return often meant warnings from fellow prisoners or messages sent from outside. She had fewer contact beyond her own cell. Her world had shrunk to a 6x8 cell and a thin mattress. One evening, a gruff cellmate named Rosa shoved an envelope to the bar window. "From your husband," she said, dropped off by a guard on his rounds. It was crisp white paper, again and signed. This note was shorter. "Check the backups. We never deleted everything." Samantha's mind raced. Backups. Phones often had automatic cloud syncing. She hadn't thought to mention that. From her limited prison phone privileges, she struggled to reach her attorney. The guard listened, but allowed one brief call. Samantha stuttered through tears, handed the mysterious note. Her attorney's first instinct was to contact forensic techs. Could those cloud backups be retrieved? Downstairs, data had been seized. Metadata, IP addresses, timestamps, all could point to who uploaded what and when. Weeks later, the state attorney's new prosecutor, Eliza Monroe, stared down at Ruiz's report. Lullabies had gone from rumor to evidence. Monroe knew the DA's office had opened a new investigation, child sexual exploitation network. Samantha's case was just one piece of a massive puzzle. She convened a meeting. Ruiz sat across from her, the folder open. "We need to subpoena John's cloud records and Gmail his storage accounts," Monroe said. "If we can trace uploads to IP addresses connected to him, if we find forensic proof, he goes down for child pornography beyond the dog charges." She paused. "We also need to protect Samantha. She's now aware of the broader case. She could be in danger, psychologically, physically." Ruiz straightened. "She keeps talking about backups. She keeps mentioning scripts, hidden archives." Monroe nodded. "We need to make sure she's safe in custody." At John's bond hearing, the courtroom crackled with unsaid intensity. Photos of the dog videos flashed from prosecution to defense. John's lawyer described him as deeply remorseful, caught in the wrong moment. John stared blankly, expression unreadable. Eliza rose. "Your Honor, based on new evidence implicating Mr. White in offenses involving children, we move to deny bail." John's lawyer bristled. "They're just rumors, unsubstantiated claims from my client's estranged wife." John himself said nothing. His mouth was a sealed line, maybe protecting himself or someone else. Samantha found new letter after a bleak roundup of lockdown. "They know where to look. You got lucky handing it all over. Here's other copies." Samantha wrote back through her attorney. "Where? How do I help stop him?" No reply. A forensic tech pulled metadata from the seized phone. Hidden in code was a synced timestamp, a backup that called home. The IP address tied back to a desk in the White household where family Wi-Fi had been used. Multiple files, images of minors, uploaded across several months. The clandestine archive never left the cloud. Behind one timestamp, John's laptop woke from sleep. He was documented. By sunrise, detectives had the subpoena ready. The new charges would be sealed until arrest. In cell block C, Samantha jolted awake to guards pounding. Handcuffs snapped. She thought it was another raid. "Ms. White, your attorney is here." The way they circled her door said something had changed. She followed timidly. At the warden's office, Eliza and Ruiz awaited, somber, professional. "Ms. White," Eliza said softly, "we're building a case against your husband. Your collaboration is crucial. If you testify to potentially reduce sentence, maybe probation in lieu of full prison term." That was more than Samantha had hoped to hear, but it felt like a lifeline tossed over a canyon. John received his indictment days later. 5 counts: possession of child pornography, transfer of illicit images involving minors, conspiracy to distribute. Each carried a minimum 5 years, maximum decades. He sat in the interrogation room under flickering plaster lights. Detective Ruiz confronted him with the email logs, time-stamped uploads, backups. "I don't know what you're talking about," John whispered. Ruiz slid a phone across the table, loaded with access logs, IP traces. John's eyes flickered, and then a sudden turn. The defense notified the court. Witness tampering. Inmates claimed Samantha had admitted to ordering something. Threats? Bribes? Monroe's jaw tightened. Now they had to prove Samantha hadn't orchestrated this information surgery, that she wasn't the mastermind. Samantha's head spun. She'd surrender what she knew to see John facing justice. But now she was an accomplice, or worse, a suspect. A third letter arrived later that night in her cell. "Stop talking or he'll bury you. For good." The prison door slammed shut behind Rosa, who had heard Samantha tear that paper in half moments earlier. Samantha fell backward on her bunk. She couldn't decide whether to cry or scream. She had unleashed a storm. Days later, investigators converged on a storage unit rented under John's alias. Inside, agents found hard drives packed with thousands of files, encrypted, hidden behind a password log. They included images in dark corner of the web. Samantha didn't know that John was preparing for something smuggling. He foresaw exposure. But what was he planning? The final scene. Samantha huddled under prison blankets, cradling the last undelivered letter. She traced the folded edges. No sender, no postmark. The paper was thin, almost industrial, like from a hotel. Her mouth moved silently as she read. "Look into the storage unit. There's more than videos in there." She sat up straight, mind racing. What if John had hidden people? Plans? Dark alliances? Detective Ruiz stood outside the storage unit, in the waning orange glow of the setting sun. The padlock had already been cut. Inside, investigators navigated stacks of plastic bins and dusty boxes under harsh floodlights. Computer equipment, SD cards, notebooks, enough to fill volumes. As they sorted through troves of data, a single phrase jumped from lab notes scrawled in tight handwriting. Phase 2. Secure subjects. That unambiguous phrase sent chills through the team. Subjects? As in people. At the prison, Samantha's world felt unmoored. She'd been moved to solitary for her protection after blurting out rumors she didn't fully understand. The severity of her isolation pressed on her mind like a stone. Her attorney, Mr. Hayes, arrived behind the plexiglass booth, holding yet another letter. This one stamped with a tracking number. He slid across to her, eyes grave. She unfolded it, trembling. There's a list. Check the backup drives. They were hidden under the floorboards in the storage unit. Inside is who he was working with. Words blurred. She slumped back, exhaling as if exorcising a demon. This changes everything, she managed. Ruby, the lead forensic data analyst, raised an eyebrow in the lab. She forwarded a decrypted file, named partners.csv. It contained a dozen names, phone numbers, and partial addresses, each corresponding to minors, neighbors, even a former babysitter. "You're in too deep," they seemed to say. As night descended, a police detail was ready for execution. Agents loaded into SUVs, heading toward the storage unit again. This time, they weren't just looking for evidence. They were preparing to make arrests. In cell block C, Samantha heard a commotion. Armored guards flanked her as they led her past rows of silent watchers into the visiting room. There, she was met not by her attorney, but by the state attorney, Eliza Monroe, stern and urgent. "We have reason to believe John is part of a larger ring. We need you to tell us everything you know. Names, times, plans." Her mind raced. "I saw messages. I have a notebook he wrote in, but I only remember initials." Eliza nodded. "That's enough. Details will come later. But right now, you need to identify whoever you can." She pulled out a thin notebook, handing it to Samantha. Pages of coded initials, numbers, and crude sketches of people. Samantha studied them, her pulse hammering. This is his network. Outside, the raid was in full swing. Agents pulled out teens and young adults, some sobbing, others staring in disbelief. Journalist helicopters buzz overhead, their beams scanning the darkness as news vans lined the perimeter. The air smelled of fuel and chaos. Inside one SUV, Detective Ruiz sat with a young officer, reviewing the list. They recognized two of the names: the babysitter from the White's live-in nanny agency and a teenager from church youth group. At her sentencing hearing, Samantha could barely look at the judge, not just her own fate, but for what she'd unmasked. The courtroom was standing room only. Media, families, survivors of abuse. Every pair of eyes bore into her, demanding answers. She spoke with a cracked but resolute voice. "I did this. I turned it over. Let those names be investigated. I can't undo what I did, but I won't let it happen to anyone else." The judge nodded, somber. "You cooperated, fully. The court acknowledges that, but the gravity remains. Your sentence is upheld. Now, cooperate further or face extended time." The prosecution planned the first of many plea discussions. Samantha for state protection in exchange for her ongoing cooperation, John facing federal charges. She left the courtroom burdened yet determined. Justice wasn't served, but it had a pulse again. Weeks later, Detective Ruiz met her at a secure conference room in the state attorney's office. "We've identified 5 others. 3 are charged. 2 remain at large. One's likely in another state." She swallowed hard. "Can I testify?" "Yes, we'll take care of you." She stared at the case files, evidence mounting, people implicated, victims waiting. The final scene pulled out, a slow pan from the conference room to an aerial view of the city. News headline scroll. Fort Myers bestiality case sparks national abuse investigation. 5 arrested in child exploitation ring. Detective Ruiz praised for breakthrough work. Samantha, cuffed but upright, is led out the door with a small entourage. She glances back, a faraway look in her eyes. Equal parts relief, resolve, fear. The camera lingers on one final frame. Her face, hard to read, but determined. Then a transportation van door slams, and the screen cuts to black. No narrative is ever truly closed. Justice clawed its way out, but the deeper truth lingered. How many more had been hidden in plain sight? How many victims still remained? Samantha's story was just the opening chapter. A painfully real reminder that the monsters closest to us are often the hardest to unmask. Her next steps, testimony, living with the fallout, confrontation with a network she barely understood, loomed ahead. Still on the run, the last 2 names. And you, watchers in the dark, what will you do when the true story unfolds?